Okay. All right, guys. So we are back for week 3, and I've got an add-on for you from week 2. But before we do that, really quick intro so you know you're in the right place. This is the Healing Members Review for December 2020. This is week 3. We are in the midst of the Lower the Load course, where we discuss how simple self-care practices like nutritious eating and regular exercise can actually support your immune system to help protect you from COVID 19. Obviously, these tips we're sharing should be used in conjunction with uh, typical practices like masking, hand washing, social distancing. These are not to be used instead of these practices. These don't replace those typical virus mitigating practices. This is just a little something extra to add to your arsenal because we're in a pandemic, folks are dying, Black people especially are dying, are contracting COVID at higher rates, are experiencing more severe COVID disease. And why don't we just protect ourselves in every single way possible? Okay. So let's see, last week we talked about how carotenoids can support your skin health. So they shore up these borders that protect the sovereign nation that is your body, right? They protect your body's sovereignty by keeping bacteria and viruses out. And carotenoids, provitamin A, especially beta carotene that you can get from carrots, sweet potatoes, winter squash like butternut squash, and pumpkins. Carotenoids help you do that. Okay. Then we talked about how, oh my God, your body has these X-Men like qualities where your skin, deep within the layers of your skin, you actually release these substances that's like your own soap or your very own bleach that can kill bacteria or viruses. And ellagic acid, which you can find in dark fruits like blackberries, like red grapes, cranberries, and pomegranate. You can even find them in some nuts like walnuts and pistachios. Ellagic acid helps your skin create more of that bacteria and virus killing chemical. And particularly, it helps these mucosal cells in your mouth. So, like that inner slimy skin that's in your mouth and your GI tract becomes better able to make this microbe killing chemical or this antimicrobial chemical when you eat enough of these foods that have ellagic acid. And then we talked about how vitamin D actually does something similar. It helps your skin cells release this other type of antimicrobial chemical, and that kills bacteria. And that's called cathelicidin. And you know what? I didn't tell you where exactly you could get vitamin D. So, right, you can eat vitamin D. You can find it in primarily animal products, eggs, dairy products like yogurt, and then fatty fish like salmon. But it's actually really hard to eat as much vitamin D as our body needs. What's more common is we get enough vitamin D if we're in the right location, right? You get enough vitamin D from the sun, specifically UVB rays, interact with your skin, and set off this whole cascade that creates vitamin D. So you have kind of a precursor to vitamin D in your body already, but you need that sunlight to activate the whole process that creates full-blown vitamin D that does all these amazing things for your immune system and beyond. Now, it turns out that most Americans live in a latitude that is not that does not get enough UVB rays, right? So most North Americans live so far away from the equator that our UVB rays are not strong enough for most of the year. Like outside of those maybe 3 peak summer months, maybe June, July, August, outside of those months, the recommendation is that we may need to take vitamin D supplements. We may need to take vitamin D pills in order to get enough vitamin D to support our immune system and the rest of our bodily functions. So that's something important for people to know if they live in North America, period, right? But it turns out that for Black folks, right, you in the audience, people who have melanated skin, it's even harder to make enough vitamin D based on the amount of sunlight that we get, because we tend to need more sunlight in order for the UVB rays to penetrate our melanated skin, right? Melanin is protective to a certain degree against these ultraviolet rays. We still need to wear sunscreen, but it's more protective than skin that has less melanin in it. And so, kind of the darker you are, the harder it is for your skin to get enough sunlight to make enough vitamin D. So the darker you are, there's this correlation, right, with the darkness, the beautiful chocolateness of your skin, and your likelihood of needing to take vitamin D supplements. So all of us need to make sure we have this conversation with our doctors, with our healthcare providers. Get your vitamin D checked. If you haven't had it checked this year or this winter, make sure you get it checked. Because if your level is low, then your doctor will prescribe a vitamin D supplement. And the amount of vitamin D that your doctor prescribes for you, like the size of the dose, is directly related to how low your level is. So it may not be helpful to just go to the store and start taking vitamin D supplements, right? That's why I'm recommending that you talk to your provider. They can give you a recommendation on what dose you need, and that's usually based on an actual measurement of the vitamin D in your body. So bam, that is how we get vitamin D that does this amazing X-Men thing to your body that helps your skin release this naturally antibacterial chemical. Oh my God, that's amazing. All right. So we just talked about the skin barrier. That's what we covered last week, and we touched on that a little bit with a vitamin D recap today. But this week, we're talking about this other piece of innate immunity. We're talking about the second phase of your immune response, which is after it's soldiers on patrol, right? So after your bacteria or virus gets through the skin, amazingly, it manages to get through that thick, multi-layered barrier. It manages to get past all that like homemade bleach and homemade soap that we have that our skin is releasing, like some type of X-Man. It manages to get through all of that, and it gets inside your body. And how are you going to fight it, right? Well, what happens is you've got these cells that are like soldiers. Remember, we're using this military metaphor here. So you've got your soldiers that are just patrolling the border. These cells have names like macrophages. They're also called, neutrophils. You've got things called dendritic cells, which we abbreviate as DC, and they're just like strolling around. They have a section of the border that they patrol. And when they get a whiff of this bacteria or a virus, something that isn't a part of your body, right? That isn't supposed to be inside. They get a whiff of that, and their job is to gobble it up. They're not scared. They go and they gobble up that piece of virus or that bacteria. And then They are programmed to, some of them, to uh, kind of create this explosion, and that's called an oxidative burst. They create this explosion that blows up the bacteria or the virus inside of them, and then it blows up themselves, right? They are like jumping on the dynamite to protect everybody. It blows up that cell, it blows up the invader that they swallowed. And that's one way to make sure that virus or that bacterium does not replicate and start invading other cells. That's one way to just kill the infection right where it is, right? Go one by one. And these cells, they're not very discriminating. These soldiers that are patrolling the border, they're really just looking for anything that looks off, anything that isn't a part of you. It isn't one of your cells, one of your tissues, one of your proteins. It's not supposed to be there. So they gobble it up. Now, some of the cells, like I said, when they gobble it up, they have this explosive oxidative burst. But other cells, they gobble it up. And instead of blowing themselves up, self-sacrificing, they actually take a piece of the virus or a piece of the bacteria and they display a little piece of that in their cell wall. And they're kind of just like showing it off. Hey, look what I got. And then they call out to these other cells. And that's in phase 3. And the other cells come help them destroy this bacteria or this virus. But we're going to get to that phase 3 in a second. All you need to know right now is in phase 2, after the invader has made it through the skin barrier, after it has violated the sovereignty of your body by making it through your borders, then you got these soldiers on patrol, right? So it has to try to get past the soldiers too. That's like the second line. And these soldiers, they're not scared. They'll gobble them up, okay? Now, turns out that the foods that we eat contain these amazing plant magic chemicals, as I call them, but they're scientifically known as polyphenols or phytochemicals. And these are, some vitamins, some nutrients and minerals that you've heard of, but others that you might not have heard of. And basically, these help our cells to do a better job. They help those soldiers that are patrolling the border to do their job better. So we're going to go through and figure out what those chemicals are that can help in phase 2 of your immune response and how exactly we can get enough of those chemicals into our body. So the first thing we want to cover is resveratrol. And you probably heard about resveratrol in the context of like red wine because it's actually very prevalent in red grapes. It's also in strawberries. And you can find it, believe it or not, in nuts like peanuts and pistachios. So resveratrol is super anti-inflammatory, which means that it helps to balance your immune system's response to infection. One of the ways that it helps to balance your immune system's response is remember that first type of response is called innate immunity, and it's when your cells, those soldiers, first see the bacteria or the virus, and then they send out signals to all their brothers and sisters, and they're like, hey, come on, all the rest of the military, get over here. We got something. We have an intruder. And they start telling your tissues to open up and get leaky so that all the rest of the soldiers can easily exit the bloodstream and flow on through to wherever it is that the invader's being held so they can really stymie this operation, really just stop it before an infection gets started. Now, we talked about that whole process, how that is called inflammation. That's an inflammatory process that causes swelling. It causes the generation of pus. That's what we call inflammation, right? So we're saying resveratrol is anti-inflammatory, and it actually keeps that inflammatory process from getting too strong, from getting going too far out of control. It's really important when you talk about a healthy immune system to think about balance. That's so important in all of our bodily functions, right? You might think that if you have an army that's protecting your borders, you might think that you want that army to just go nuts. You want that army to respond with as much strength and might as possible and just not let up ever, right? But if that army goes nuts, it's beaten the invaders to a pulp. It's made sure that the invaders are not going to invite more of their friends. They're not going to replicate. They are not going to create an infection in this here body, okay? It's figure that out. If that army keeps on burning and, blowing up dynamite and having these oxidative bursts, it's going to destroy your town. It's going to destroy your whole country if it doesn't know when to let up. And so there are chemicals, there are signals in our body, and there are cells that do the job of telling your immune system, okay, chill. You've done enough. We've got the invader. We've got a really good response going. We have our strategy over here. Y'all can calm down before you start destroying everything we worked so hard to build in this country. Why don't you chill? That's really important, and that's resveratrol actually supports that action. It supports that anti-inflammatory action that is basically a chill pill for the military, for your soldiers on patrol, for that inflammatory process. Once it has done enough, it can start to die down, okay? So that it doesn't create more harm. And last week we talked about how the harm created by too much inflammation is actually what we end up seeing in the worst complications of COVID-19, right? It's not the virus that is causing people's lungs to stop functioning. It's actually our body's immune response to the virus, our attempt to really knock this virus into tomorrow that creates too much pus, too much leakiness of the tissues and the vessels, too much inflammation so that your lungs can't work well, you can't breathe, right? So it is of incredible importance that your immune response is balanced, and resveratrol can help you do that. Now, it kind of works both sides because while it keeps you from mounting an inflammatory response that is too robust, that's just going too far, it also helps to build up the patroller cells, those soldiers that are on patrol that we talked about. So it's kind of keeping you from doing too much and keeping you and helping you to do just enough at the same time. So that's a really wonderful thing about resveratrol. And we just talked about a bunch of the foods it's in. Kind of tasty foods. Red, dark fruits, and tasty nuts. All right. So, vitamin C is next up. We generally think of vitamin C as being in citrus, right? You think of vitamin C in like lemons and oranges, but did you know that vitamin C can also be in peppers? There's tons of vitamin C in hot peppers. So green chili peppers have more vitamin C than the red chili peppers, and it turns out that bright bell peppers, which aren't spicy, they're sweet, but the bright bell peppers like the yellow and the orange and the red, they tend to have vitamins, quite a bit of vitamin C. And even leafy greens like kale have vitamin C in them. Plenty of it. So these are foods to make sure you got tons of in your diet to have in order to have a healthy immune response, in order to get close as possible to your immune potential. Now, how does vitamin C support your immune system? Well, it's an antioxidant. So, um, uh, remember those cells, those macrophages, and the neutrophils, the ones we talked about that gobble up your invaders, and then they like dive on the dynamite and blow themselves up and blow the invaders up inside of them. Well, when that's happening, imagine what would happen to all the cells and all the tissues surrounding that explosion. You would think that that big explosion would just leave a, a gorge, a huge gap of destruction, a wave of destruction around the explosion, right? But it turns out that your body uses antioxidants to protect the tissues around the explosion from the explosion. Isn't that amazing? So those are called antioxidants, right? Because the explosion is called an oxidative burst. And so antioxidants like vitamin C are the chemicals that your body uses to protect itself. So that's a really big deal to make sure you have enough vitamin C. And it turns out that people who smoke cigarettes end up needing more vitamin C because they've got so much more of a stress response to the cigarettes, so much more. They have so much more need for antioxidants. Okay, there's another thing that vitamin C does, and it actually just helps you build up your immune cells. So the same ones that are gobbling up and destroying the viruses with that big old dynamite like explosion, vitamin C actually just helps you build more of those. And then, of course, it helps you protect all your other tissues from the explosion that those cells end up making. So cool. Okay. Now, here's the thing. We've been talking about the foods that you should eat more of in order to make sure that you're supporting your immune system, right? Well, this is a food free in added sugars. This is a type of food that you should actually make sure you're not getting too much of, because getting too much sugar, free and added sugar, can actually dull your immune response. It can handicap your patroller cells, the ones that are responsible for patrolling your borders and then gobbling up the bacteria and viruses and then doing that whole explosive thing. So what are free and added sugars? It's a little bit of a complicated concept if you've never heard of it, but let's give it a shot here. So you've got whole food sugars. Let's say an orange, right, has sugar in it, and that's natural. We understand that the sugar in an orange that you've just gotten off the shelf that has its peel still on, it grew from the tree with that sugar. And it turns out that it has these phytochemicals, including flavonoids, but a bunch of others that support the way that your body handles the sugar. And so the amount of sugar in that orange is just appropriate for the fiber and the phytochemicals and all the other things that are in the orange to help you handle the sugar. What happens when the orange gets processed is you start to get uh, those special ingredients that nature built into the orange. You start to get them removed or diminished, right? And that means that you end up getting, in many cases, concentrated sugar that doesn't come with it doesn't come with training wheels. It doesn't come with all the helper nutrients we just mentioned that will help your body manage the sugar. It's just kind of a lot of sugar and not a lot of support. So, what's an example of this processed sugar? If you go from an orange, a whole food that has natural sugar, and then you juice the orange, right? Um, and you remove the pulp, then that is actually considered a free sugar. So you got orange juice that has had pulp removed. The pulp is fiber. The pulp is something that actually helps you deal with the sugar. It helps your body metabolize the sugar without spiking your blood sugar too high. And so you've just removed some of the training wheels that would have helped your body deal with the sugar. And now you've got a bit more concentrated sugar. Okay? Because, how many oranges does it take to make one serving of orange juice? At least 2 or 3, not just the one orange that you were probably going to eat that might have actually filled you up because it has all this fibrous pulp in it, right? So you've got your free sugar in the form of this orange juice, okay? And that is a more processed version of your whole food sugar, which was the orange. But can it go even further? Yes, it can. So if you were to go drink some orange soda, right? You go get some Fanta, and the sugar that you have there is not natural sugar. It hasn't come from the whole food product. It's added, right? It's high fructose corn syrup. It's like table sugar that's been added to this other set of factory ingredients to make orange soda. Now, the sugar in orange soda is something we call added sugar. So remember the sugar in the orange juice that was the product of a naturally occurring sugar after some processing. That sugar in the orange juice is called free sugar, right? It's been kind of liberated from its training wheels, right? It's liberated from all those helper nutrients that we actually needed, like fiber. So it's free sugar. But when you talk about orange soda, when you talk about table sugar, when you talk about agave syrup or maple syrup or honey or any other type of just freestanding sugar, that's what we call added sugars. So free and added sugars, because you can't manage your blood sugar as well when you eat free or drink free and added sugars, your blood sugar spikes higher than it would if you ate just an orange, or if you ate the same amount of sugar in a full orange, right? If you have to eat like 10 oranges to get the same grams of sugar that are in a bottle of Fanta, okay, so be it. But those 10 oranges are still not going to spike your blood sugar as high as the bottle of Fanta does. And why is that? It's because the bottle of Fanta, similar to the orange juice, doesn't give you as much support in managing that sugar load because it's not natural. So It turns out that when your blood sugar spikes super high, it can stun these patroller cells, like your neutrophils. Studies have shown that for about 8 hours after uh, a really high sugar spike, neutrophils are just less active. It's pretty incredible. They just sort of do their job worse for, you know, a whole workday. Like 9 to 5, if that's our workday, 8 hours, neutrophils are just kind of messing up for that whole time. And remember, these are the cells that are patrolling our borders. They are responsible for gobbling up the bacteria, for gobbling up the viruses, for like jumping on that grenade, jumping on the dynamite, and destroying them. We don't need neutrophils to mess up here. That's a bad thing. So you want to avoid those high spikes of your blood sugar. And the way to do that is to limit your free and added sugars. Now, the World Health Organization has a recommendation for how to limit free and added sugars. The American Heart Association has their recommendations, and so does the CDC. And they all slightly differ, but I'll tell you, the American Heart Association recommends that women uh, eat no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugars, and men get no more than 9 teaspoons of added sugars a day. Now, um, if you're like adding teaspoons of sugar to your coffee, then that metric helps you, but maybe not so much if you're like drinking orange soda and trying to figure out, well, how many teaspoons of sugar is in this. So it turns out that there's just over 4 grams of sugar in a teaspoon of sugar, right? So for women, if the limit is 6 teaspoons of sugar, then we're really talking about something closer to like 25 grams or so a day of added sugar is your limit. That's not that much. And so for men, we're actually looking at more of a sort of uh, 38 to 39 grams of sugar a day is your limit. And that estimate is really just based on estimates of the total number of calories required by men and women, and assuming that men are bigger and men have more mass with higher energy demands, that they need more calories. But again, if you are someone who's working with uh, a personal provider, a doctor, a dietitian, etc., who's helping you come up with a plan for how many calories you need, then you can apply this yourself. The American Heart Association says no more than about 6% of your daily calories should be sugar. That's what ends up uh, when you do the math. That's what ends up um, being read as like 6 teaspoons versus 9 teaspoons for men. But really, what it comes down to is no more than 6% of your total daily calories should be added sugar. And the World Health Organization adds free sugars, including 100% juice, into that limit and says, look, no more than 6% of your daily calories should be free or added sugars. We really just need to emphasize these whole food sugars like full fruits and full veggies, as opposed to these free and added sugars that are missing fiber, they're missing phytonutrients, they're missing all of the uh, all of the uh, handlebars, all of the uh, kitty wheels, right? That you need to be able to metabolize your sugar and keep it stable, keep your blood sugar stable without spiking too high. All right, so we spent a lot of time focused on that. Um, I'm gonna try to zoom through here. We're gonna talk about flavonoids next. So we're back to talking about the foods that are actually really helpful for you. So flavonoids are this gigantic combination of phytochemicals, those the plant magic chemicals that we talk about. And you probably heard of these. You probably know that flavonoids are really rich in blueberries or red grapes, right? These purplish blue foods. They're also rich in eggplants. But did you know that flavonoids are just abundant in cocoa powder? Like, not with sugar added, right? But just dark cocoa powder, unsweetened. There's also tons of flavonoids in red onions and cloves and star anise and Mexican oregano. And I mentioned red onions, but they're also they abound in shallots too. So when we talk about flavonoids, we're actually talking about this gigantic compilation of chemicals. There's around 6,000 of them, okay? And they're really amazing. They have these antioxidant effects, they have these anti-inflammatory effects, and we already talked about the value of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory chemicals to your immune system, balancing it out, right? Protecting you, but also uh, helping you stay safe and also keeping your immune system from being too robust. And that's exactly their value. They just balance you out, right? Keep the inflammation under control. And there are some studies that suggest that flavonoids might actually improve the immune barrier of your intestines. They might actually improve the level of some antibodies that exist in your intestines and that inner layer of mucosal skin, right? So that's really important stuff. Go flavonoids. Next, we've got zinc and selenium. These are trace minerals. You can find these usually on the back. You may be able to find these on the back of your nutrition label. So, zinc and selenium are really important for this third phase of the immune response. And I'm going to pause right here for a second, and we're going to come back in the next video and talk about this third phase of the immune response. All right, guys, you're doing a great job. Keep hanging in there. We're going through a lot, and we'll get